The late afternoon sun, a bruised orange, bled through the leaves of the ancient oak that stood sentinel over Alex Mercer's backyard. Its dappled light danced on the surface of the pool, turning the cerulean water into a living, shifting canvas. For Alex, that pool wasn't just an amenity. It was an inheritance, a tangible piece of his family's story. His grandfather, a carpenter with calloused hands and a penchant for ambitious projects, had poured every ounce of his modest savings and sweat into building it back in '78. Alex remembered summer days sticky with sunscreen and chlorine, the scent of sizzling burgers on the grill, and his grandmother's melodic laughter echoing off the water as he learned to swim. The house, a modest but sturdy split level, had been passed down from his grandparents to his parents, and then, 2 years ago to him. Moving back to Oak Haven had been a deliberate choice, a return to roots after years spent navigating the sterile cubicles of corporate America. He sought a slower pace, a connection to the past, and a safe haven for his own budding family. Though, for now, it was just him and his golden retriever, Gus. The piece, however, was as fragile as old lace. It arrived in a crisp, cream-colored envelope tucked beneath a stack of junk mail in his mailbox. The sender, Oak Haven Homeowners Association. Alex had scoffed when he first learned about the HOA upon moving in. A relatively new imposition created just a decade ago, long after most of the houses in this older part of Oak Haven were built. He'd paid his dues, attended one mind-numbingly dull annual meeting, and promptly forgotten about them. He tore open the envelope. The paper inside was thick, formal, and adorned with an intimidatingly official letterhead. The first sentence hit him like a physical blow. Notice of violation, unapproved structure, swimming pool. Alex blinked, rereading the words. Unapproved? His grandfather's pool? He felt a strange, cold prickle of unreality. He skimmed further, his eyes catching numbers that made his stomach clench. $5,000 fine. And then, the kicker. Failure to pay within 30 days will result in additional daily fines and potential legal action, including foreclosure proceedings. Foreclosure. For a pool that had hosted 4 decades of family memories, a raw, hot anger, unfamiliar in its intensity, began to simmer within him. He grabbed his phone, his thumb hovering over the number for the HOA office, then paused. This wasn't a problem to be solved with an angry phone call. This was something deeper, something insidious. He took a deep breath, trying to calm the tremor in his hands. Gus, sensing his master's distress, nudged his leg, a soft whine escaping his throat. "It's okay, boy," Alex mumbled, though it wasn't. Not at all. The next morning, Alex walked into the HOA office, located in a soulless, rented suite above a dental practice in the strip mall on the edge of town. The air inside was cool, smelling faintly of stale coffee and industrial cleaner. Behind a polished faux wood desk sat a woman with meticulously styled silver hair and a gaze that could chip granite, Mrs. Albright, the HOA board president. She was notorious in Oak Haven for her unwavering adherence to rules, a self-appointed guardian of suburban conformity. Alex had met her briefly at the annual meeting. She'd critiqued his slightly overgrown hedges with the precision of a military strategist. "Mr. Mercer," she said, her voice a precise, clipped instrument. "We sent you a notice," she gestured, "to the letter, which lay on the corner of her desk, a copy already pulled." "I received it, Mrs. Albright," Alex said, forcing his voice to remain steady. "And I'm here to understand what this is. My family has owned that property for over 40 years. The pool has been there since 1978, long before the Oak Haven HOA even existed." Mrs. Albright's lips, thin and unadorned by lipstick, pursed. "That may be, Mr. Mercer. However, upon the establishment of the Oak Haven Homeowners Association 10 years ago, all properties within our jurisdiction became subject to our covenants, conditions, and Restrictions, or CC&Rs. Section 7.2, subsection B clearly states that any exterior structural additions, including swimming pools, must be approved by the Architectural Review Committee. There is no record of your pool ever being submitted for approval, because it existed before your committee, Alex retorted, his voice rising despite his best efforts. Are you telling me that every resident with an existing structure, a shed, a deck, a fence, built before your HOA had to retroactively apply for approval? No, Mr. Mercer, she corrected, her tone chillingly calm. That is not what I'm telling you. The CC&Rs include a grandfather clause for many existing structures. However, it specifically excludes structures that, in the committee's determination, pose a significant aesthetic or safety concern, or are considered a nuisance. After a recent reevaluation of properties in your section, your pool was deemed to fall under this exclusion. Alex stared at her, dumbfounded. A nuisance? My pool? It's perfectly maintained. It's been inspected regularly by the county for safety. What aesthetic concern? Its age, Mr. Mercer, she stated, as if discussing a peeling paint chip. And its lack of modern aesthetic integration with the current guidelines for Oakhaven properties. We aim for a cohesive, updated visual standard. Furthermore, an anonymous complaint was filed regarding the noise level from your pool area during a recent weekend. Anonymous complaint. Alex's mind immediately went to the new neighbors, the Chengs, who had moved in 3 months ago. They were quiet, reserved, and had given him polite but distant nods across the fence. He'd had a small gathering by the pool 2 weekends ago. Nothing wild, just a few old college friends and some music playing softly. Could it have been them? Or was this just a convenient excuse? So, because it's old and there was an anonymous complaint, you can bypass the grandfather clause and fine me $5,000? Alex pressed, disbelief hardening into a dangerous resolve. The board has made its decision, Mrs. Albright concluded, pushing the copy of the letter across the desk. The fine is due within 30 days. I suggest you review the CC&Rs thoroughly, Mr. Mercer. He left the office feeling as if he'd been stripped bare, exposed to an arbitrary, uncaring system. The Oakhaven HOA, he realized, wasn't just about maintaining property values. It was about control, about power, and Mrs. Albright wielded that power with an almost religious fervor. Back home, Alex dove into the labyrinthine depths of the Oakhaven CC&Rs. He found the grandfather clause. Section 6.1. Existing structures predating the establishment of the Oakhaven HOA, January 1, 2015, are exempt from initial ARC approval, provided they adhere to all current safety codes and do not present an active nuisance or significant visible blight. And then Section 7.2, subsection B, the one Mrs. Albright had quoted, outlining the ARC's authority to demand retro approval for structures deemed a significant aesthetic or safety concern, or nuisance. It felt deliberately vague, a loophole, big enough to drive a truck through. Significant visible blight was subjective. Nuisance was even more so. He spent the rest of the day in a flurry of calls. First, to his uncle, David, who was his mother's brother and had helped his grandfather with the pool's construction. Uncle Dave, Alex began, do you remember anything about Grandpa's pool permits or anything official about its construction? Permits? Back then, Uncle Dave chuckled, a hearty, nostalgic sound. Son, that was 78. You just built things. We got the county inspection when it was done, but a permit before digging? Nah, not like today. And certainly no HOA breathing down our necks. They were fields out there then, not subdivisions. His uncle's words were a comforting reminder of a simpler time, but offered no concrete legal ammunition. The county records office was equally unhelpful. They confirmed his pool had passed its final inspection in late '78, but pre-construction permits from that era were either non-existent or long archived in a way that made them practically unretrievable. without a specific case number, which Alex didn't have. Next, he called a lawyer, recommended by a friend. Mr. Henderson, a weary-sounding man who specialized in property disputes, listened patiently. HOA cases are tricky, Mr. Mercer. Henderson sighed. They usually have ironclad CC&Rs. The burden of proof is often on the homeowner. You'd have to prove that their interpretation of significant aesthetic concern or nuisance is arbitrary and capricious, which is hard to do. And anonymous complaints make it even harder. They can always say it's based on community input. So, I just pay it? Alex felt a cold dread settle in. Well, you can fight it, Henderson said, his voice regaining a sliver of professional zeal. But litigation against an HOA can be expensive, drawn out, and emotionally draining, unless you have undeniable proof that their claim is completely baseless or that their process was flawed. For example, if you could prove your pool explicitly met an earlier, more lenient version of the grandfather clause, or if you could find evidence that the HOA itself somehow acknowledged the pool's existence and approved it indirectly at some point. The lawyer's words echoed Mrs. Albright's. Proof. He needed proof. Not just anecdotal evidence from his uncle, but something concrete, official, indisputable. The next few days were a blur of frustration and simmering anger. Alex felt like he was drowning in paperwork, a bureaucratic current dragging him under. He stared at the CC&Rs, the dense legal jargon blurring before his eyes. What if there was something in the very founding documents of the HOA, something he was... Mrs. Albright's fingers, adorned with a single, unostentatious gold band, tightened around the edge of the Oak Haven HOA founding agreement. Her gaze, usually so impenetrable, darted from Alex's resolute face to the highlighted text. Then, back to the cover of the document. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving a faint, almost sickly pallor. It was subtle, but Alex saw it. The crack was widening. This is an old document, Mr. Mercer, she stammered, her voice losing, its clipped precision replaced by a tremor he hadn't heard before. The current CC&Rs supersede any previous agreements. Alex leaned forward, his voice calm, deliberate, a stark contrast to her faltering composure. With all due respect, Mrs. Albright, foundational documents like this are not simply superseded without explicit formal amendment. The CC&Rs you quoted, Section 7.2, subsection B, cannot unilaterally negate a permanently grandfathered clause from the very agreement that established this HOA, especially when that clause specifically lists swimming pools. Furthermore, your current CC&Rs require a demonstrable, active, and ongoing nuisance as determined by a neutral third-party assessment to override grandfathering. An anonymous complaint and your subjective opinion on aesthetic integration simply don't cut it. He watched her, the rigid posture she usually maintained now seeming to waver. Her silver hair, which had seemed so immaculately controlled, suddenly looked a little too stiff, a little too perfect. She looked like a general, whose strategic map had just been revealed to be fundamentally flawed. The board was operating under the current published CC&Rs, she finally managed, her voice thin. We weren't aware of this specific wording in the original agreement. That's a rather significant oversight for the board president of a homeowners association, wouldn't you say? Alex's tone was polite, but laced with a sharp edge. He wasn't here to gloat, but he wouldn't let her off easy. This document is publicly filed. It's the very foundation of your authority. Ignorance of the law, as they say, is no excuse. She pushed the document back across the desk, her hand trembling slightly. I will need to consult with the board and our legal counsel. I suggest you do, Alex replied, picking up the agreement. My lawyer, Mr. Henderson, is already fully apprised of the situation. He agrees that the fine is baseless, and we are prepared to pursue all legal avenues if it is not immediately rescinded. That includes seeking compensation for harassment and legal fees. He let the threat hang in the air, potent and unspoken. The silence in the small office was thick, broken only by the hum of the fluorescent lights. Mrs. Albright looked genuinely cornered, her usual iron facade crumbling. "You'll hear from us, Mr. Mercer," she finally said, her voice barely a whisper, devoid of its usual frosty authority. "I look forward to it," Alex stated, turning to leave. As he reached the door, he paused, looking back at her. "And Mrs. Albright? My pool is not a nuisance. It's a piece of Oak Haven history, and my family's." He walked out, the taste of victory sweet on his tongue. It wasn't just the $5,000 fine he was avoiding. It was the principle. He had faced down arbitrary power with cold, hard facts, and, for the first time in years, he felt a surge of pride in his old home, in his family's legacy. The next few days were agonizing. Alex felt a nervous energy thrumming beneath his skin. He kept expecting a call, an email, anything. The silence from the HOA was almost worse than the confrontation. He knew Mrs. Albright wouldn't give up easily. She was too proud, too invested, in her image of unwavering control. He half expected her to concoct some new, even more ridiculous accusation. Then, on Friday afternoon, his phone rang. It was Mr. Henderson, Mr. Mercer. The lawyer's voice was notably brighter than before. "Good news. I just received a call from the HOA's council. They've reviewed the founding agreement. They agree that the fine against your pool is indeed invalid. They are officially rescinding the violation notice and the fine. They've also offered to cover your legal consultation fees for this matter." Alex let out a long, slow breath. He hadn't realized he was holding. "They rescinded it? Just like that? Just like that." The permanently grandfathered language, combined with the strict conditions for overriding it, demonstrable, active, and ongoing nuisance, as determined by a neutral third-party assessment, left them no room to maneuver. Their current CC&Rs simply couldn't stand against the foundational document. They knew they'd lose in court and likely face a much larger payout in damages. Mrs. Albright, I'm told, was quite displeased, but even she couldn't argue with their own legal counsel. A wave of relief, profound and encompassing, washed over Alex. He had won. The pool was safe. His home was safe. That's fantastic, Mr. Henderson. Thank you." "My pleasure, Mr. Mercer. You did the groundwork. I just confirmed it. It's a rare case where the homeowner comes in with all the evidence laid out so clearly." Alex hung up, a wide grin spreading across his face. He walked out to the backyard, Gus trotting happily at his heels. The pool shimmered under the afternoon sun, no longer a symbol of oppression, but a testament to persistence. He looked around at his property, at the familiar trees, the sturdy house. It felt truly his again, free from the arbitrary gaze of the HOA. He spent the weekend celebrating quietly. He cleaned the pool, trimmed the hedges to Mrs. Albright's preferred length, just to be petty, and enjoyed the simple pleasure of sitting by the water, a cold drink in his hand. He even thought about calling his college friends for another small gathering. On Monday morning, a different envelope arrived. This one was thinner, less imposing. It was from the HOA, but not the stern, official letterhead of the violation notice. This was a standard white envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It was a formal apology. "Dear Mr. Mercer," it began, in surprisingly conciliatory language. "On behalf of the Oak Haven Homeowners Association Board, we sincerely apologize for the error regarding the violation notice issued for your swimming pool. Upon further review of the Oak Haven HOA founding agreement, document number 2015-0122-345, it has become clear that your property's swimming pool is indeed permanently grandfathered under Section 5, Article 3. The previous notice has been fully rescinded and the $5,000 fine is nullified. We understand this caused you undue stress and expense, and we have authorized reimbursement for your legal consultation fees. we are taking immediate steps to review and update our internal procedures to ensure such errors do not occur again. We value all our homeowners and strive to maintain a harmonious community. Sincerely, the Oak Haven Homeowners Association Board. The signature at the bottom was Eleanor Albright, Board President. It was curt, certainly not effusive, but it was there, an apology. And from Mrs. Albright herself, even if it was clearly a corporate-mandated one. It was a small victory, but a significant one. Alex folded the letter carefully. He knew this wasn't the end. Mrs. Albright had lost a battle, but he doubted she would forget it. The public apology, however dry, was a humiliation for her. And power, once challenged, often seeks to reassert itself. He had revealed a flaw in the foundation of her authority, and that kind of revelation rarely goes unpunished in the subtle, often venomous world of HOA politics. Later that week, Alex decided to pay a visit to Martha Jenkins at the Historical Society. He wanted to thank her for pointing him towards the old documents. Martha, delighted by his success, poured them both tea. So, the founding agreement did the trick, did it? She beamed over her teacup. It certainly did, Alex confirmed. And I owe you a huge debt of gratitude, Martha. You pointed me in the right direction. Oh, nonsense, dear boy. Just happy to see history being put to good use, she chuckled. Though I must say I've heard a few whispers since then. Whispers? Yes, about the board. Seems Mrs. Albright isn't. Quite so unchallenged, shall we say. Some of the other board members are apparently a bit miffed that she pushed this through without proper due diligence, especially with the legal fees involved. They're talking about forming a review committee for board decisions. Martha's eyes twinkled mischievously over her teacup. Seems your little victory might have stirred the pot a bit more than just your pool. Alex smiled. That was intriguing. A review committee for Mrs. Albright's decisions? That sounded like a direct challenge to her autocratic rule. He hadn't just saved his pool. He might have inadvertently sparked a minor revolution within the HOA. He thanked Martha and left, feeling a sense of satisfaction. But as he drove home, a new thought began to form. If the founding agreement was so easily overlooked, what else was being overlooked or misinterpreted by the current board? And what about that anonymous complaint about his pool noise? Mrs. Albright had used it as part of her justification. He still suspected the Chengs, his new neighbors. They hadn't said a word to him since the incident, but he'd caught them. Casting quick, furtive glances his way whenever he was in the yard, he decided to test a theory. That evening, he hosted another small gathering by the pool. Not a loud party, but a few friends, quiet music, the gentle murmur of conversation. He made a point of keeping the music low and wrapping up by 9 p.m. He wanted to see if another complaint would surface. If it did, it would confirm his suspicions about the Chengs, and he would know he had a different kind of neighborly battle on his hands. The next morning, no new violation notice, R. The formal apology from the Oak Haven HOA board, signed by Eleanor Albright, lay on Alex's kitchen counter like a peace treaty after a skirmish. It was a victory, undeniable and sweet, but it also felt like the quiet before a storm. Mrs. Albright was not one to concede defeat gracefully, and the admission of error, however carefully worded, was a public humiliation for a woman who thrived on unchallenged authority. Alex folded the letter, tucking it into the same drawer where he kept his grandfather's old photo albums. He had won the battle for his pool, but the war, he suspected, was far from over. The revelation about the Chengs was a different kind of lesson. It highlighted the fragility of neighborly peace in a community governed by a distant, often arbitrary power. Mrs. Cheng's hesitant apology had diffused a potential private conflict, but it underscored the HOA's capacity to weaponize minor grievances. Alex found himself scrutinizing the small details of Oak Haven, the perfectly manicured lawns, the uniform mailboxes, the carefully chosen paint palettes. Beneath the surface of suburban serenity, he now saw a simmering cauldron of unspoken rules and anxieties. A week later, the first tremor of the coming storm arrived, not with a fine, but with a meticulously designed brochure tucked into every Oakhaven mailbox. It was titled Oakhaven's Vision for Tomorrow, Elevating Our Community Aesthetics. The glossy paper showcased sleek modern homes with minimalist landscaping, not the comfortable lived-in charm of the older Oakhaven estates. The text spoke of harmonizing architectural styles, enhancing property values through uniformity, and embracing contemporary design. Buried within the flowery prose was the announcement of the Oakhaven Revitalization Initiative. It wasn't mandatory, yet, but it strongly recommended that homeowners consider upgrading their driveways to permeable pavers, installing new HOA-approved low-voltage landscape lighting, and replacing older, non-conforming exterior elements like mailboxes, garden sheds, and even certain types of fencing. The HOA, the brochure stated, would be holding a series of informational workshops, and tellingly, there was a mention of incentives for early adoption. Alex scoffed. Incentives usually translated to future penalties if you didn't comply. This was Mrs. Albright's new gambit, a softer, more insidious approach to control. She couldn't fine him for his existing grandfathered pool, but she could push a narrative of modernization that would subtly pressure owners of older homes into costly, unnecessary renovations. His grandfather's sturdy wooden shed, a relic of practical utility, was suddenly non-conforming. His perfectly functional concrete driveway was outdated. He decided to visit Martha Jenkins again. She was the unofficial chronicler of Oakhaven, and if anyone would see through Mrs. Albright's new maneuver, it would be her. "Ah, the Vision for Tomorrow brochure," Martha said, a wry smile playing on her lips as Alex placed a copy on her desk. "Got one myself. Quite the piece of work, isn't it?" "It's a thinly veiled attempt to force people into renovations they don't need," Alex stated. "And I bet it's aimed squarely at the older homes," Martha nodded. "Precisely. And it's already causing a stir. I've had a few calls. Mrs. Henderson down on Elm Street, bless her heart, she's worried sick about her prize-winning rose garden. It apparently clashes with the new landscape guidelines. And old Mr. Peterson, his wooden fence built when the house was, is now considered dilapidated by their new standards, even though it's perfectly sound." "Dilapidated? My shed's probably next," Alex muttered. "They're using vague terms again, just like with my pool." "Indeed, but this time it's not a fine, not yet. It's a recommendation. They're testing the waters, seeing how much pushback they get." Martha paused, peering at him over her spectacles. "You know, Mr. Mercer, your little victory with the founding agreement." It resonated. People heard about it. It gave them courage. Many of these older homeowners, they feel like the HOA board, particularly Mrs. Albright, doesn't represent their interests. They're tired of the constant nitpicking, the feeling that their homes aren't good enough unless they conform to some arbitrary cookie-cutter ideal. A thought, still nascent, began to solidify in Alex's mind. "Martha, what if we organized something? A meeting? Just for homeowners who feel this way? To discuss these new recommendations and whether they truly serve the community?" Martha's eyes lit up. "Now that's an idea, Mr. Mercer, a very good idea. People are afraid to speak up alone. But together—" She trailed off, a hopeful glint in her eyes. "Where would you hold it? Not at the HOA building, obviously." "My place?" Alex said, a sense of conviction settling over him. "My backyard. By the pool." He smirked. "It would be rather ironic, wouldn't it?" Martha clapped her hands softly. "Perfect. A symbol of resistance, right there. I can help spread the word. I know quite a few folks who would be very interested." Over the next few days, word spread through Oakhaven, primarily through Martha's extensive network of old-timers, but also through Alex's own cautious outreach. He talked to neighbors he rarely interacted with, shared his story, and heard theirs. He found Mrs. Henderson, a woman with a gentle demeanor, but a fierce protectiveness over her garden. He met Mr. Peterson, a retired engineer, meticulous and methodical, who viewed the HOA's aesthetic guidelines as an affront to common sense. He discovered that the HOA's tactics weren't just limited to aesthetic improvements. A young couple, the Millers, had recently been denied approval for a small sunroom addition because it interrupted the natural sight lines of the street, a subjective ruling that baffled them since it was at the back of their property. Another homeowner, a single mother named Clara, had been fined for improper fence maintenance when a single board had warped slightly after a storm. The fine had been hefty, and she'd felt helpless. Each story fueled Alex's resolve. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about a pattern of overreach, a gradual tightening of control. The evening of the meeting arrived. Alex had set up folding chairs around his pool, the water reflecting the soft glow of solar-powered lanterns. He had brewed coffee, made a pitcher of iced tea, and even baked a batch of cookies, a skill he'd picked up during his corporate burnout phase. Gus, sensing the unusual gathering, wagged his tail excitedly, greeting each new arrival with a hopeful sniff. 20 people showed up. 20 people from different parts of Oakhaven, all with a shared undercurrent of frustration. There were retirees, young couples, single parents. They looked around at Alex's pool, some admiring its classic lines, others looking at it as a symbol of the arbitrary power Alex had defied. Alex stood before them, a little nervous, but determined. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice clear. "I called this meeting because, like many of you, I've had my own recent experience. With the Oakhaven HOA, you might have heard about my pool." A few nods and murmurs rippled through the group. He recounted his story, calmly, factually, about the $5,000 fine, the founding agreement, and Mrs. Albright's eventual grudging apology. He saw expressions of surprise, anger, and vindication on their faces, and now, he continued, holding up the Vision for Tomorrow brochure, "We have this. Recommendations for aesthetic improvements that, in my opinion, are designed to put financial pressure on us, especially those of us in older homes, to conform to a vision that isn't ours." He opened the floor for discussion. At first there was hesitant silence. Then a dam broke. Mrs. Henderson spoke first, her voice quivering with indignation. "My roses! They want me to trim for conformity. I've been growing those roses for 30 years. They're an English heirloom variety, not some bland, low-maintenance bush." Mr. Peterson, ever the engineer, laid out his grievance. "They tried to tell me my shed was a blight." "A shed? It's perfectly good, weather-tight. They wanted me to replace it with one of their approved resin models, said it would enhance the street view, even though you can barely see it from the street." Clara, the single mother, spoke with quiet intensity. "The fence fine. It nearly broke me. I work 2 jobs. I told them I'd fix it the next weekend, but they just slapped me with the fine. They didn't care about the circumstances. It felt like they just wanted to punish me." The stories piled up, a tapestry of petty grievances and genuine injustices. Arbitrary interpretations of rules, inconsistent enforcement, a feeling of being unheard and disrespected. It wasn't just Mrs. Albright, it was the whole board, operating with an almost imperial disregard for the individual. "They just steamroll us because we're individuals," one man, Mr. Davies, said, shaking his head. "They know we can't afford to fight them." "But what if we weren't individuals?" Alex said, raising his voice slightly. He looked around at the faces, seeing their shared frustration morphing into a collective resolve. "What if we were a group? A unified voice? They had to back down on my pool because I found their own foundational document. What if we found other flaws? What if we challenged their interpretations of the CC&Rs as a collective? A buzz went through the group. The idea was clearly appealing. What would that even look like? Someone asked. First, Alex proposed, we form a homeowners advocacy group. We pool our resources. Not money yet, but information. Everyone brings their violation notices, their correspondence with the HOA, anything that feels unfair or arbitrary. We look for patterns. We identify which board mem? The Oakhaven Homeowners Alliance, as Alex, Mr. Peterson, and Clara christened it, moved swiftly. Their first collective action was to send a formal letter to the HOA board, meticulously drafted by Mr. Peterson, demanding a review of the Oakhaven Revitalization Initiative and a public itemized account of how existing CC&Rs would be applied to older grandfathered properties. The letter, signed by all 20 attendees of the initial meeting, also formally requested a special general meeting of all Oakhaven homeowners, citing a provision in the CC&Rs that allowed such a meeting if a sufficient number of signatures were collected. They included a printout of the relevant section of the founding agreement, highlighted in bright yellow. The reply from the HOA was swift and cutting, arriving within 3 days. It was signed by Mrs. Albright, but the tone was far colder, more dismissive than her recent apology. The letter stated that the Revitalization Initiative was merely a set of recommendations, and therefore no review was necessary. It also claimed that the request for a special general meeting did not meet the minimum signature threshold, as several signatures appeared to be duplicated or from non-homeowners. The implicit accusation hung heavy in the air. They were trying to cheat the system. Alex fumed. Duplicated? Non-homeowners? That's a flat-out lie. We checked every name against the county property records. They're trying to discredit us. He slammed the letter down on his kitchen table, where Mr. Peterson and Clara were reviewing it. Standard procedure for them, son, Mr. Peterson said, his voice calm despite the clear indignation in his eyes. They're trying to shut us down before we gain momentum. They want us to get frustrated and give up. But what about the special meeting? Clara asked, her brow furrowed. We have the signatures. We counted them twice. We'll need to verify every single one, publicly if necessary, Alex said, running a hand through his hair. But this is just a smokescreen. Albright's real retaliation will be more direct. She can't find the pool again, but she'll hit us where it hurts. He was right. The very next day, a series of identical notices appeared on the front doors of several key members of the alliance, Mrs. Henderson, Mr. Peterson, and even Clara. Not fines, but notices of inspection. The HOA announced sudden mandatory property inspections for routine compliance checks in specific sections of Oakhaven, coincidentally the very sections where the Alliance's most vocal members resided. Mrs. Henderson called Alex in a panic, her voice trembling. They say they're inspecting my property tomorrow for routine maintenance compliance. You think it's because of the Alliance? Absolutely. Alex confirmed, his voice grim. They're targeting us. They can't find your roses directly, but they'll find some loose shingle, a speck of mildew on the siding, anything to slap you with a violation. Mr. Peterson, ever the pragmatist, was already preparing. I'll be there for my inspection. Document everything. Take photos, every single inch. They won't find anything on my property that isn't up to snuff, not after 40 years of my own meticulous maintenance. Clara, however, was in a more vulnerable position. My fence, she whispered over the phone to Alex, her voice thick with worry. They already fined me for it once. I fixed it, but what if they find something else? I can't afford another fine, Alex. I just can't. Alex's stomach clenched. This was exactly what Mrs. Albright wanted, to instill fear, to break their resolve by financially burdening those who dared to stand up. He immediately went to Clara's house. Her small, well-kept home looked even more fragile under the shadow. of the looming HOA inspection. "Clara, show me everything," Alex said, walking around her property with a critical eye. He checked her fence, her gutters, the paint on her trim. Everything looked clean, well-maintained. "It's just, they always find something," Clara said, wringing her hands. "Last time it was a warped board the size of my thumb. They called it structural instability and slapped me with a $700 fine." Alex's mind raced. He had an idea, a risky one, but potentially effective. "Clara, tomorrow when the inspector comes, make sure you have Mr. Peterson's camera ready. Take detailed photos of everything they point out. Don't argue with them, just document. And then as soon as they leave, call me." The next day was tense. Alex, Mr. Peterson, and Mrs. Henderson all endured their inspections. Mr. Peterson, true to his word, meticulously documented every moment. The inspector, a young man named Kevin, who looked deeply uncomfortable, found absolutely nothing wrong with Mr. Peterson's property, despite spending an unusually long time scrutinizing every corner. Mrs. Henderson received a notice for improper shrub height for one of her rose bushes, a paltry $50 fine. It was petty, almost laughable, but it was a clear warning. Then Clara called Alex, her voice trembling again. "They found something, Alex! They found it!" "What is it?" Alex asked, his heart sinking. "My mailbox post," she choked out. "They said it's deteriorated beyond acceptable standards and poses a tripping hazard. They issued a fine for $200. And they said I have 7 days to replace it with an HOA-approved design or face daily penalties." Alex felt a cold fury wash over him. A mailbox post? $200. This was outright extortion, a clear attempt to punish Clara and send a message to the rest of the alliance. He knew Clara's mailbox post. It was old, yes, but sturdy, buried deep in the ground. It was an absurdity. "Clara," Alex said, his voice firm, "do you have the photos?" "Yes, I took so many," she whispered, still distraught. "Good. Don't worry. Don't pay the fine. We're going to fight this. And we're not just fighting for you, Clara. We're fighting for all of us." He immediately called Mr. Peterson. They went after Clara, a $200 fine for her mailbox post. They're calling it a tripping hazard. "A tripping hazard?" Mr. Peterson scoffed. "That post has been there for 30 years. It's concrete reinforced. This is beyond ridiculous. This is harassment." "It is," Alex agreed. "And we're going to expose it. Peterson, I need your expertise. Clara has photos. I want you to come over to her place. We're going to dismantle that mailbox post, carefully, and we're going to show everyone what's really underneath it." Mr. Peterson understood immediately. "You're thinking what I'm thinking, aren't you? Prove their hazard claim is a fabrication." "Exactly. And this time, we're not just arguing legal precedent. We're going to show the whole community the lengths the HOA will go to bully homeowners." The plan was simple, audacious, and risky. They decided to perform a public excavation of Clara's mailbox post. Not a destructive act, but a careful, methodical uncovering of the post's foundation. They invited Martha Jenkins to document it with her camera, and they discreetly spread the word to other members of the alliance. 2 days later, on a Saturday morning, a small but determined crowd gathered in front of Clara's house. Alex, armed, with a shovel, and Mr. Peterson, with a crowbar and a level, began to carefully dig around the base of the mailbox post. Clara, still nervous but bolstered by the support, held her phone, recording everything. Martha Jenkins clicked away with her own camera. The HOA inspector's report had claimed the post was rotting at the base and loosely set in deteriorated soil. Alex and Peterson dug, slowly at first, then with more confidence as they exposed the foundation. The post was not rotting, it was not loose. It was set deep, at least 3 feet into the ground, encased in a solid block of concrete, as sturdy as a small tree trunk. The soil around it was firm. There was no deterioration, no tripping hazard. "Look at this," Mr. Peterson announced, holding up the level against the post, which stood perfectly plumb. "Solid as a rock. This thing isn't going anywhere." Alex picked up a piece of the surrounding soil, crumbling it in his hand. "Deteriorated soil? This is prime Oak Haven loam. There's absolutely nothing wrong with this post." The small crowd murmured, their faces a mix of outrage and satisfaction. Clara, seeing the clear evidence, felt tears welling in her eyes, but this time they were tears of relief and anger, not despair. Suddenly, a car pulled up. It was Mrs. Albright, her face a mask of furious indignation. She had clearly been tipped off about the gathering. Behind her, another car, belonging to her fellow board member, Mr. Davies, not the Mr. Davies from their alliance, but a different, more malleable Davies on the board, pulled up as well. "What is the meaning of this, Mr. Mercer?" Mrs. Albright demanded, striding towards them, her voice shrill. "You are engaging in unauthorized digging on private property. This is a violation of community bylaws." Alex stood up, wiping sweat from his brow. He pointed to the excavated post, its sturdy, concrete base now fully exposed. "This, Mrs. Albright, is us disproving your baseless, fraudulent claim that Clara's mailbox post is a tripping hazard and deteriorated. As you can plainly see, it is perfectly sound, firmly anchored, and poses no danger whatsoever." He then looked at the gathered homeowners. "This is what the HOA is doing, everyone. They're not protecting our property values. They're manufacturing violations to extort money and intimidate us into conforming to their arbitrary vision. This isn't about safety or aesthetics, it's about control and punishment." A ripple of angry murmurs went through the crowd. Clara stepped forward, her voice surprisingly strong. "They fined me $200 for this, $1,200 for a perfectly good mailbox post." Mrs. Albright's face turned scarlet. She opened her mouth to speak, but Mr. Peterson cut. The public humiliation at Clara's mailbox post was a seismic event in Oak Haven. News traveled faster than Mrs. Albright's meticulously crafted community newsletters. Eyewitness accounts, buttressed by Clara's phone footage and Martha Jenkins's. Photographs spread like wildfire through neighborhood group chats, garden club meetings, and casual sidewalk conversations. The image of Alex standing over the exposed, concrete-embedded mailbox post, calmly dismantling Mrs. Albright's fabricated claims, became an instant legend. The initial shock quickly solidified into widespread outrage. The Oak Haven homeowners. Alliance, once a small, cautious gathering, swelled overnight. Phones rang off the hook at Alex's and Mr. Peterson's homes. Homeowners who had previously suffered in silence now came forward with their own stories of petty fines, arbitrary denials, and unreasonable demands. The common thread was a pervasive sense of powerlessness against a board perceived as out of touch and autocratic, led by Mrs. Albright. The very next Monday, the HOA office was besieged, not by angry mobs, but by a steady stream of homeowners, each carrying a copy of the original founding agreement, now highlighted and dog-eared. They demanded clarification, challenged their own past fines, and most importantly, signed the petition for the special general meeting. The minimum signature threshold, once dismissed by Mrs. Albright as unsubstantiated, was now not just met, but overwhelmingly surpassed. The board was forced to convene an emergency meeting. Alex knew this because Mr. Davies, the malleable board member who had visibly flinched at Clara's mailbox, reached out to him discreetly. "Mr. Mercer," Mr. Davies stammered over the phone, "this has gone too far. Eleanor, Mrs. Albright is refusing to acknowledge the gravity of the situation. She insists it's just a few disgruntled residents. It's a community-wide uprising." "Mr. Davies?" Alex corrected gently. "And the evidence is undeniable. We've got multiple homeowners with photographic and contractor-verified proof of frivolous violations. What's the board's plan?" "She's dug in," Davies sighed. "She says we'll just deny the special meeting again, claim more irregularities. But frankly, The rest of the board is getting cold feet, especially after the legal counsel made it clear we'd lose any court battle over Clara's mailbox. The risk of a class action lawsuit is very real now, Alex pressed. Then the board has a choice. Back Mrs. Albright and risk litigation, or uphold the actual founding principles of this HOA and represent the homeowners. Which side are you on, Mr. Davies? The silence on the other end was heavy. I'm on the side of doing what's right for Oakhaven, Mr. Mercer. This is not what I signed up for. 2 days later, the HOA sent out a formal notice. A special general meeting of Oakhaven homeowners would be held the following Saturday at the community center. The agenda was simple: discussion of Oakhaven HOA governance and future direction. Mrs. Albright had lost her first internal battle. The sheer volume of signatures and the threat of wider legal action had forced her hand. The community center, typically sparsely populated for HOA meetings, was packed to capacity. Standing room only. The air crackled with anticipation. Mrs. Albright sat at the head of the board's table, her posture rigid, her face a mask of defiant composure, but her eyes held a brittle, almost desperate flicker. Other board members looked nervous, some avoiding eye contact with the restless crowd. Alex, Mr. Peterson, and Clara sat in the front row, representing the alliance. Martha Jenkins was there too, notebook in hand, ready to document history. Mrs. Albright began, reading from a prepared statement about community harmony and responsible governance. She tried to gloss over the recent controversies, framing them as unfortunate misunderstandings, but the homeowners weren't having it. When she opened the floor for questions, hands shot up everywhere. Clara, gaining courage from the sheer number of sympathetic faces, stood first. She calmly presented her case, detailing the $200 fine and the subsequent public excavation of her mailbox post, culminating in a dramatic flourish as she projected Clara's own phone video of the event onto the large screen behind the stage. The murmurs of outrage became an undeniable roar. "This is not a misunderstanding, Mrs. Albright," Clara's voice resonated through the hall. "This is harassment, this is extortion, and this is why we demand accountability." Mr. Peterson followed, presenting a meticulously researched comparison of the current CC&Rs against the founding agreement, highlighting how the board had selectively interpreted or outright ignored key grandfathering clauses and provisions for neutral third-party assessment. He systematically dismantled the legal basis of the Revitalization Initiative, showing how it undermined homeowner rights. Then, Alex stood up. He spoke not just of his pool, but of the pattern of overreach, of the culture of fear that had permeated Oakhaven under the current leadership. "This isn't just about fines or aesthetics," he declared, his voice firm and clear. "It's about trust. It's about whether this HOA truly represents the interests of all homeowners, or if it acts as an arbitrary authority, imposing its will without consent or justification." A motion was formally made from the floor. A vote of no confidence in the current Oakhaven HOA board, specifically targeting the leadership of President Eleanor Albright, and a call for immediate new board elections. The motion was seconded immediately by none other than Mr. Davies, who had finally found his backbone. His defection sent a visible shockwave through the board's table. Mrs. Albright's jaw dropped, her eyes widening in disbelief. The vote was taken. Hands shot up across the room, a sea of raised arms affirming the motion. The count was overwhelming. The motion passed by a landslide. Mrs. Albright, her face pale and drawn, was stripped of her power in a single, decisive moment. She tried to protest, to appeal to procedure, but the will of the community was clear and undeniable. Humiliated and defeated, she gathered her papers, her once unshakable composure completely shattered, and walked out of the meeting. Her departure met with a silence that spoke volumes. The granite facade had not just cracked, it had crumbled. In the ensuing days, Clara's $200 fine was immediately rescinded, along with Mrs. Henderson's petty rosebush penalty and any other outstanding, questionable violations. The Oak Haven Revitalization Initiative was formally put on indefinite hold, pending a full, transparent review and a community-wide vote on any proposed changes. New elections were swiftly organized. Alex, despite a strong push from many homeowners, declined to run for president, preferring to remain an active voice from the sidelines. Mr. Peterson, with his analytical mind and methodical approach, was elected as the new HOA board president, and Clara, empowered by her experience, became a vital new board member, ensuring a voice for the previously unheard. Under the new leadership, the Oak Haven HOA underwent a profound transformation. Transparency became paramount. All major decisions were put to community vote. The founding agreement was re-emphasized as the guiding document, its grandfathering clauses respected. The focus shifted from punitive fines and arbitrary aesthetic dictates to genuine community improvement, collaborative problem-solving, and a renewed sense of shared responsibility. Months later, on a warm summer evening, Alex stood by his pool. The water shimmered under the golden light of dusk, its presence no longer a point of contention, but a symbol of freedom. He heard the gentle laughter of children from the Cheng's yard next door. They had joined him and Gus for an afternoon swim, a testament to true neighborly peace, built on open communication rather than anonymous complaints. His pool, a legacy from his grandfather, now held a new significance. It was not just a place of family history, but a monument to a community's reclaimed autonomy, a quiet victory in the suburbs. The battle for his pool had inadvertently become the catalyst for Oak Haven's own quiet revolution, proving that even in the most tightly controlled communities, truth and unity could and would prevail.